What note is this? If I had perfect pitch, I could tell you. But I don't. So I won't. Is perfect pitch inherent? Can it be learned? Let's talk about it. You're listening to Music Student 101. And now, your hosts, Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips.
Here we are on another fine episode of Music Student 101.
Here we are again.
I am Jeremy Burns.
I am Matthew Scott Phillips.
Hey, Matt.
Yes, sir.
Before we even get into this episode, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Is this by chance the G, the low G that's on the bass guitar? Was it?
Nah, you were about a step off.
Okay.
That was about an A.
Okay.
The low G was about there. Yeah.
So it could be that I don't have perfect pitch.
It could be. I certainly don't.
What I did was the reason I use that note is because I've been playing bass for 30 plus years.
Right.
How many times do you think I've tuned that thing? And every time I do, the G stringer is the last one that I tune.
Right.
And it's also the highest in register, so it's probably going to stick out in my head more.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of tried to, and before you came over, before I got my shower, I played that on my bass, and I kind of had it in my head and went to take a shower, listened to some Macy Gray, came down, then Matt starts playing something in D minor and throws me off a little more.
It's my fault. I instigated chaos.
But all that to say that if I had perfect pitch, none of those factors would really get in the way.
It would really have mattered. My strategy might have been to try for E or A because you probably play in those keys more often as a bass player.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you've probably tuned into those strings a little bit better because you've hit those open strings much more often.
You know, it turns out there's a few different approaches that people try for this kind of thing, and
oh yeah,
some of them might work, some of them might not. We're going to kind of get into it, you know.
Excellent. I can't wait. This has always been a sort of fascinating idea to me.
Absolutely. So before we get into that, a couple of things.
Yes.
The new website is up.
Yay!
We now have YouTube links embedded, so you can actually watch the YouTube on the page or listen while you check out the page.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully it's a cleaner design with, better sectioned off and everything. And
yeah, we think you'll like it.
I began this project learning how to code during COVID. And
just now, does it bear fruit?
Now it finally bears fruit, yeah. A lot of stuff went into it. So let us know what you think and if you catch anything, because in the process, I'm not positive I caught all my own mistakes,
Right.
But I'm still going through that and working on that. And I have listeners who are helping us out with that. Actually, I got an email just today or just yesterday from a listener. Gustav caught an error on the donation page.
Ah, very nice.
The links weren't there, so I had to go ahead and put the links up.
Put the links up.
So we can actually get donations. So yeah, man. And I've also been listening to old episodes, and I check each page because
right.
I believe that maybe somewhere in the first 10 episodes we said, soon we will do an episode on perfect pitch. That was probably the ear training episode, the first one of those.
Probably, yeah.
Intervals or something like that.
And by soon, we mean 6 years later.
Yes, 7 probably at this point. But here we are. And also, another fun little side note, I listened to our episode on being a performer versus being just a musician.
Yeah.
And in there, I kind of have to eat my own words. I have to kind of take a cue from myself in that episode because I was talking about how you embody a persona on stage.
Right.
Well, Jenny, the lead singer of Jenny's Mixtape, has decided that she wants us all to kind of wear these over-the-top kind of costumes.
I've heard of that. I heard about that. Yeah.
That represent
I can't wait.
90s characters, Turns out I'm going to be the Adidas hip-hop dude with the bucket hat and the red striped suit.
I can't wait. As someone who is not in this band and does not have to dress up, I'm enjoying this idea, man.
Oh, my God. Me and Colin were against it at first, but we're kind of embracing it now. As we should, because we're performers.
Indeed.
Anyways, moving on. Let's thank our new Patreon patron, shall we, Matt?
Let's do that.
We have Andy Brunker from Southern California.
We do, and Andy says, I'm trying to be a completionist and listening to some of the mid-COVID era shows now, and it's kind of Funny? Question mark?
Back when I was learning to code.
We remember these episodes very, very well, Andy. Man, were we struggling.
Yes.
Just like
Technologically speaking,
we were struggling, and I mean, it was just it was just a crazy time for everybody, I think, and. Oh man, we were not in Jeremy's comfortable basement. At least I wasn't. We were doing this over Zoom, which is not really designed for this kind of thing.
Yeah, Matt had an H4. We had to clap to sync it up and all that stuff.
Send you the audio files. I remember all those, the good old days.
Cumbersome to say the least.
Yeah, I don't even remember. I remember talking about inharmonic modulation sometime during COVID, and yeah, it was nuts. Anyway, Andy continues, probably not the right word, but enjoyably weird to hear a few years on. I bet. My instruments of choice are various synthesizers and drum machines. On my desk now I have a couple Korgs, a Moog, and a fun DIY Raspberry Pi-based Zynthian that has lots of sample/sound fonts. I just listened to the Orchestration for Strings episodes, and I'm using the various samples in there to add some more organic sounds on top of the electronic ones.
Hey.
Nice. I'm looking forward to getting caught up and hearing your more modern episodes, but your back catalog continues to enthrall me and draw me back for a second or third listen. I'm confident that I'm making much more interesting music now that I've got 100 episodes of Music Student 101 under my belt. I hope this journey is doing good things for you and Matt, whether it's opening opportunities or simply letting you go to sleep each night knowing you're making a difference in other people's lives. Forever grateful, Andy Brunker. Well, we are grateful for you, Andy.
Yeah, and maybe one day it'll open some opportunities, but currently we are getting better sleep, I think.
I think we're getting better sleep, and it's always been kind of a labor of love for us, and it's gotten probably bigger at this point than we initially expected it to, which is great. Yeah. We do this for our listeners and for our patrons, like you, Andy.
Yes, Andy is a Patreon patron.
He is.
And so we are paid quarterly by these donations.
We are, yeah. And that's what keeps the lights on in Jeremy's studio, and if you want to become a Patreon patron yourself,
you can go to patreon.com/musicstudent101, or you can check on the donate link on our website. Now that is now active. Yay. And the $1 a month people get on the page and can see the new bonus episodes we have and the cool little videos, one or two that we have up there. And the $3 patrons, those who give $3 a month, can get the coffee mug plus the previous perks. And then the $5 plus patrons can get their own special episode, which will be available exclusively on the Patreon site.
In which we answer your music questions specifically in no less than 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. It's usually more than that.
Yes, definitely 15 minutes of content, perhaps a few extra minutes of digressions.
But people like the digressions. People like the digressions.
They do. Now, also, we have a listener mail here.
Indeed. Anna Smith from Silver Spring, Maryland. Mm-hmm. Anna says, I am a 50-year-old woman who decided to learn the flute for the first time. My son abandoned it in middle school. Mm-hmm. Well, that happens.
A common tale, I'm sure.
Yes. I took a music appreciation course in college and loved it. Thank you so much for your interesting and wonderful work. I love the variety of topics and learning about music theory. My flute teacher and I dissect your episodes.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, that is cool. The highlight was dissecting the piece Pop Goes the Weasel while I was trying to stay awake for a work meeting on Zoom.
Does that ring a bell, Matt?
Whatever helps. Mm-hmm. Thank goodness for the mute button. Keep up the great work. Happy midlife mama.
And Anna wanted us to be sure that we gave a shout out to Melissa Linden, her flute teacher.
Her wonderful flute teacher of infinite patience.
Yes. And how cool that they dissect our episodes, right?
That's just amazing, yeah.
I want to say a good music teacher for any instrument should at least introduce the topics of theory and ear training.
Indeed, absolutely. Absolutely. You're limiting your students if you don't do that.
Anna says that she likes to do religious pieces on the flute and her church because of the excellent acoustics. And she says that music has redeemed her soul after all.
Wow.
Take that as you will, but at the very least, it's a testimony to the power of music, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I just saw today where Anna gave us, I'm checking my emails, I saw Anna actually gave us a PayPal donation
That
as
is
well.
so great. Thank you so much, Anna.
So this is paying off, you know? That was really sweet, Anna. And Andy Brunker, thank you so much.
Thank you all very, very much for keeping us going here.
Yeah. Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk a little bit about some facts about perfect pitch, some which were maybe thought to be at one point, but may have changed over time. We're going to talk about perfect pitch versus relative pitch.
Right.
And then we're going to maybe talk about ways to improve your relative pitch, which is basically what this podcast is all about. And then we'll talk about what I call the perfect pitch sales pitch.
The perfect pitch sales pitch. I can't wait.
Can you dig it? And then we'll have a little fun at the end. We're going to talk about some famous people with perfect pitch.
Okay.
All right.
Excellent.
So, some facts about perfect pitch, or some things about perfect pitch.
Okay.
Some items.
Yeah.
According to an article in Scientific American in 2020, 1 to 5 out of every 10,000 people have perfect pitch.
That is not a lot.
That's not a lot. Now, culture factors into some degree here because in America, that's 1 out of every 10,000 people.
Yeah.
0.01%.
Yeah.
The people in China who speak Cantonese, and particularly Mandarin, the rates can be up to 9 times higher.
Yeah. I bet.
Close to half the cultures around the world rely on pitch compared to Western cultures such as the U.S. and U.K.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. So some Mandarin and Cantonese are what I've heard referred to as tone languages, meaning the pitch at which you speak a word can actually affect that word's meaning. Right. So it doesn't surprise me that there are more people in those cultures that develop perfect pitch, you know, because it can be important for communication. Right.
Yeah. Now, we use pitch all the time.
We do.
But it doesn't really change the meanings of the words, right?
No. I mean, you know, the we still is still a plural pronoun no matter what pitch you say it at, or however many pitches you say it at. You know, we can use pitch to change inflection or to put inflection in particular points and things, but yeah, it doesn't change. You know, like in Mandarin, I've heard a single word might mean butterfly or grandmother, like depending on
yes,
the pitch or pitches you use.
Well,
right
at the very most, it might change from a question to a declaration to an a question. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that might be a change to the style in which you present.
Well, that happens in English.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying in English. Yeah,
yeah. It changes from a declaration to a question or whatever. Yeah,
but but like you're saying in Mandarin, for example, the word "ma" spoken in a higher pitch means mother.
Yeah,
in a lower pitch it means hemp. So
you have to be careful.
If a baby comes out and says "ma," the doctor's gonna have to say, A, that's illegal. B, you're probably too young for that. You know
Is it illegal in China? I don't know.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
He's probably still too young for it.
Probably still too young for it.
So let's stick with Ma. Not to mention Ma is kind of the universal mother. It seems like that those the first syllables a kid says, basically.
Right, yeah.
But anyways, so these stats remain relative, though, and higher in general among musicians.
Yeah.
As one can imagine. According to a study released in the Journal of Acoustical Society of America in 2004, which was a hot minute ago, of course, depending on the age music was introduced to the student, the Mandarin-speaking music students who have perfect pitch range from 40 to 60%.
Wow.
And that's compared to Americans who begin at a similar ages whose ranges max out around 12%. Okay? And also, so that's culture. Age tends to be a factor. Most scientists maintain that when music is introduced during the early stages of development, like 6 years or younger, the chances of absolute pitch development is increased. And by
absolute being the same thing as perfect.
That's right. Yeah, I should have said that. Perfect pitch is just kind of the standard kind of term, but more scientifically, it's known to be absolute pitch.
Right.
So maybe there's a nature versus nurture discussion to be had. You know what I mean? Or maybe there's a genetics discussion to be had.
Yeah, nature versus nurture one too. I've often wondered whether, people with perfect people with perfect pitch find their way into music, or whether studying music helps you develop perfect pitch.
Right, because you imagine that there's probably people out there that do not play music but have perfect pitch, and probably they might know an A note from any other note, but they might not know to call it an A note because they never learned music.
Right, yeah.
Or they would just say like, oh, I hear 440 vibrations a second. That's what I hear.
Yeah, and they wouldn't necessarily know that. So how would those people even realize they have perfect pitch?
They might not. They might not. We're neither geneticists or...
we are not. Or statisticians.
Or child development psychologists.
Or anything like that, no. We're musicians.
But those who are claim these things, right? Along the lines of age being a factor, these functions change and lessen over time. Mm-hmm. You know, in some studies and observations, absolute pitch or perfect pitch has changed and lessened for the aging population, especially if they don't use it.
Yeah.
Next page. Now, here's an interesting thing. I kind of thought I heard this before too, as the autism spectrum might be a factor.
Really?
Yeah. Perfect pitch might be an example of the piecemeal processing that is common in those on the spectrum.
Okay.
According to one parent report study, children with autism are 500 times more likely to have perfect pitch.
That's a lot.
That's considerable.
Yeah.
And I think that based on a lot of stuff I've been seeing and reading and hearing and watching, there seems to be a spectrum of absolute pitch or perfect pitch.
Yeah.
I remember a while ago I worked on this TV show, and I can't remember what it was called. It was so long ago, but it featured a kid in Birmingham who had perfect pitch, and we spent the day with him and his family. And this kid was what I consider to be on the very hypersensitive end of perfect pitch, to where if you threw a rock at the ground, he could tell you what notes were involved.
Wow.
With notes were involved, right? And also, it was a bit to his detriment at times because he played in a band with older musicians. He was a very fantastic musician. He played drums, guitar, everything. At like the age of 10 or 12, you know? But he would get flack from the older cats because he would tell them when they're out of tune. And, you know, they've been playing all their lives, and this little kid's like, can you please tune that because it's really driving me crazy. They didn't always like that.
No, probably not. I mean, you know, somebody whose pitch is that well refined, it will sound out of tune to them before it sounds out of tune to you, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so you may think you're playing in perfect tune, and then he's over there just ouch. Yeah.
Oh, and this kid aside, let's talk about me. Let's talk about the spectrum, right? Because my friend Colin, and fellow musician who's been in most of the bands I've been in throughout my life, and we had on this show and everything.
We did.
He took the same courses as I did. He got the same degree as I did, and the same ear training and all that stuff. But he doesn't do a podcast for ear training and music theory. And yet he can hear if I'm a little bit out or if one of my notes is out on the low end on the bass. He'll be like, hey, dude, you know, on stage, he'll hear it before I will.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's definitely different levels of pitch, you know.
Of pitch awareness, yeah.
Like Matt came down and he sang what he thought was an A, and I went over there and played it on the bass, and it was way closer to my version of the G compared, you know. So it's different for everybody.
I just envisioned a bass line that I've played like 100 gazillion times in my life, and
Okay, real quick, Fleetwood Mac. Bum, 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 bum. Okay, was that an A note? Play it. Okay. All right.
Now you're playing G.
Just shoot me. I do not have perfect
harder
pitch.
than it looks.
Yeah. Oh, lovely.
Yeah. Please don't sue us, Stevie Nicks. But yeah.
Hey, let's talk about perfect.
Yeah. Anyway.
Let's talk about perfect pitch versus relative pitch, because that's obviously what I have.
Right.
To whatever.
Let's talk about, because we've talked about relative pitch a lot. Basically, any ear training episode or Jeremy torture episode is basically the skill of relative pitch that we're trying to develop.
Exactly.
Or help you develop. Or help Jeremy develop.
Lord help me. The more like I said, the more technical term for perfect pitch is absolute pitch, right?
Right.
And that's really what we're talking about when we say someone has perfect pitch.
Yeah, what that is the ability to basically, out of thin air, tell you whether a note is an A or a D flat or whatever, right?
Yeah. And there's some people who can seem to have it perfectly. If you quiz somebody, when you say there's no such thing as perfection, you could quiz somebody 100 times, and when someone with really perfect pitch would get it out of every 100 times.
Wow, yeah.
In rapid fire sometimes.
That's why it's more called absolute pitch, really. I mean, it's...
Mm-hmm. But I'd still call that a perfect score.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have before you, Matt, the Merriam-Webster definition of perfect pitch. What is that?
The ability to recognize or sing a given isolated note.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you say that's a little bit of a lazy definition, Matt? I mean,
yes.
I would add without the use or assistance of an instrument or
without aid.
Yeah. There's a few things also that are kind of apparent in somebody with perfect pitch, or some things, superpowers that people with perfect pitch might have.
And it's not necessarily isolated note either. I mean...
Oh, right. It could be a cluster.
Yeah.
Like a chord.
Like a chord, or, a succession of notes, or...
And where somebody with relative pitch could tell you the quality of the chord, they might not be able to tell you just by hearing it what exactly, if it's a C major 7 or E major 7 or whatever kind of...
Furthermore, any consistent sound frequency is interpreted by the ears as a musical note, whether it is in tune or not. Mm-hmm. I mean, an A string that has fallen a few cents flat is still playing a musical note, right? Mm-hmm. So we're not talking about recognizing isolated notes when you think about it.
We're really talking about frequencies.
We're really talking about frequencies, yeah. And we're talking about the ability to recognize and associate those frequencies with musical terminology. Mm-hmm. Is that safe to say? Like,
I think so.
I know an A when I hear it. So when I hear 440 hertz, I'm going to know that's A. Mm-hmm. Whereas if I heard 440.835 hertz, it's going to sound out of tune, right?
If you have perfect pitch?
Yes.
Yeah. So they can identify the name by name individual pitches, as we just said, played on any given instrument, right?
Yeah. The word pitch ought to be in that definition. Somebody at Merriam-Webster needs to revisit.
Yeah.
Because the word pitch, given, or at least musical note, something needs, that needs to be more.
Uh-huh. Another thing people with perfect pitch can do is name the key of a given piece of tonal music.
Is that true? I didn't necessarily realize that, because I didn't really know how that worked in their brain.
This might be a little bit more of the hypersensitive end,
Yeah.
And they can also name pitches of common everyday non-musical sounds, like that kid I was talking about.
Right, yeah.
Now, most people who have listened to this show can tell you that a train horn is a C add 6 chord or an A minor 7 chord.
Right.
But that's just because that's become a standard.
Right, yeah. They just intellectually know that. They're not recognizing the chord.
Yeah, now here's another thing. The allied ability to sing notes on demand, which by itself is kind of termed perfect pitch, appears to be a little bit less common than we think in people with perfect pitch. So they can hear a note and tell you what it is, but some of them actually cannot produce the note. Yeah. Probably lesser of them are
probably
on the lower end of the spectrum, as we call it.
Singing is a different skill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, singing in tune also.
I appreciate it. Yeah, you're telling me.
So like I said, there's varying degrees of what we call absolute pitch, it seems.
Right.
I found a video on YouTube called Perfect Pitch, Blessing or Curse. The presenter, pianist Albert Franst, explains some of the details, For example, he's sitting at a piano that is tuned to 443. Did you know that the Vienna Orchestra tunes to 443?
I didn't know that, but I'm not surprised.
Turns out, and that's where he was in Vienna with a piano, and he said that didn't bother him.
Yeah, okay.
Having perfect pitch. But it might bother somebody like that kid I was talking about, whose name I won't name, but who was on that TV show.
Yeah.
That might bother him.
Which, again, it makes me feel like what we're talking about is an ability to recognize a note's derivation from a given standard, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like you've got this idea in your head of what A is, and A is 440. So, if you hear A is 443 and that, quote unquote bothers you, I mean, A equals 443 is still a musical note. Mm-hmm. Right, so it's not just, oh hey, that sounds like it's 443. It's like it bothers them that it sounds too sharp. So it's like there's some element of this definition that is like a comparative to a paradigm, right? Comparative of the note you're hearing versus the note that you expect to hear, I guess.
Right.
You know.
And if anybody's curious, the Vienna, the reason they tune up to 443, apparently those 3 frequencies make the difference between a brighter sound to them for some of the songs, for some of the pieces, which is interesting to me. Because if you don't have anything to relate it to, that's just what you wake up to.
Right.
That's what you show up and that's what they're playing. I don't know. You know, it's kind of weird.
I wonder if I would hear that.
Yeah.
I mean, back to back, maybe I would. I'd have the best chance of hearing it if I heard it back to back in 440 and 443. But I wonder if I would sit in the Vienna Orchestra and wonder how they got their sound so bright. I don't know if I'm that good.
Yeah, right. Well, another thing this guy mentions, Albert Franz, that is, he can mainly identify notes on the piano, and it takes him longer to process non-piano tones. Him being a pianist, which is interesting, don't you think?
I do think that's interesting. I mean, it speaks to how he may have developed perfect pitch in the first place. You know, sitting at the piano,
probably at a very early age.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And notes that are the same frequency, but from different timbres, different instruments are going to have different sets of overtones, right? So the first, second, and third, all the way on up, partials are going to have different strengths relative to each other than they would on the piano. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if that's what confuses him.
I'm not sure. Maybe so. Maybe so. Another thing about this guy is he says if he's given a massive cluster of notes or if they're happening too quickly, he can get overwhelmed. So where he knows others with absolute pitch don't.
Yeah.
You know?
It's probably kind of like you trying to watch 7 or 8 videos at once. Mm-hmm. You know?
Yeah, right.
All coming through the same screen. You know,
people have brains that are wired to do that.
Yeah. This is a little bit of a digression. I know I never do this. I never digress like that. But I saw or heard an NPR report once about this person who could listen to like 4 or 5 different symphonies at once.
I mean, anyone can listen to 4 or 5 different symphonies.
Yeah, but like he could then tell you what key each one was in and things. And like you could stop one and he'd be not listening to it and it'd be playing in his head. And he could tell you where it was in the symphony.
Amazing.
And then when you hit the playback again, he was right. You know, he'd been tracking in his head while listening to all of these other things going on at once. Yeah,
I call that a superpower.
Yeah, right. Me too.
Now, Matt, you have before you also the Merriam-Webster definition of relative pitch.
I do.
What is that?
The ability to recognize or produce a musical tone at its correct pitch according to its relative position in a scale. I like that definition a little better.
Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate on that, Matt?
I can. So, if I give you... let's do this. If I give you C...
Okay.
And all of us... who have taken music classes in college have learned at least a little bit of this skill. If I give you C, and I say C is the tonic note, so the first degree of the C scale, the C major scale, and we call it Do. Do.
And we would refer to this as our reference tone in the case of relative pitch.
Right, yeah. So we then, relative pitch is the ability to pick out other pitches relative to Do.
Okay.
For example, Do, Mi.
The third.
Right, yeah. And So. Let me try to actually do it. So.
5.
Yeah, exactly. Do, mi, sol, mi, do, re, do. This is relative pitch. If we're given a pitch, we can pick out other notes that are relative to it, usually along a scale. You can actually pick out all 11 other notes if you're good enough relative to a given note. It's just once you get outside of the scale, they get a lot harder, right?
Mm-hmm. But really, there are a lot of people that suggest that relative pitch is actually more beneficial than absolute pitch for musicians specifically.
Well, it's certainly a lot more common.
Yes.
I honestly, you mentioned that anecdote about Colin sort of saying, hey, your bass is out of tune. I actually think that might be relative pitch, too. He might be hearing, your your notes as relative to the notes he's playing.
And clearly he's more sensitive to it because I'm grooving like nothing's going on.
Right.
He's got this sour look on his face.
He might also just be standing closer to your amp or something, you know? I mean,
oh, thank you, Matt.
Well,
I don't think that's the case, but anyway, there are ways to improve your relative pitch. In short, just keep on listening to this show and all the ear training
and
episodes
all
we
the
do.
ear training and Jeremy torture and
over and over and over and over again. But we do have. I've read an article that has four ways, and I think in proper order. You want to read those and elaborate on them, Matt?
I do.
Go ahead.
Ways to improve your relative pitch. Practice intervals.
Very first thing you want to learn is intervals, right?
Is intervals, and this is helpful to a point. I think I personally feel like this becomes not helpful after a certain point. But in the beginning, you're doing things like and saying what interval was that?
Major 6.
Very good. And then you're saying things like let's go down.
Have more problems going down, but maybe that was a fifth or a fourth.
It's a fourth, yeah.
Okay, fourth.
Good work, yeah. Fourths and fifths are easy to confuse.
Yeah,
right. Super easy to confuse.
Still,
because they're both perfect intervals. And then we'll do one more, just because I'm starting to have fun.
And, I used to relate these to songs, so that sounds to be like the Greensleeves minor third interval.
Yeah, that's the minor there.
But it took me knowing that song to kind of get that in my head. Nowadays, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because you were saying that you didn't agree as much that was the way to go compared to just listening for dissonance levels. Didn't you? Or am I putting words in your mouth?
No. You're pretty good. Everybody likes that song trick because it works. It gets you good at recognizing intervals. The disconnect I have is in then applying that great recognition of intervals to understanding music that you hear. At which case, you're never going to go. You're never going to. And if anybody out there does have perfect pitch, tell me the key I was playing it in and which one I ought to have played it in. Anyway,
okay.
You're not ever going to listen to that and go perfect fourth, up a minor, up a perfect fourth and down, and you're never going to do that. Our brains don't process music that way.
And music doesn't go that slow for us to do that if we want it.
Exactly. What you're hearing is a scale. So do do do, re mi fa mi re do, so mi re do do. That's what you hear. So I like to focus on learning intervals by learning to sing your scale. So let's pick a different interval. And what do you think that one is? You want to guess?
That sounds like a tritone. Oh, wait. Do it again. Oh. Minor 6.
Very good.
Minor 6.
Very good,
Close.
And the way I like to think of that is do, re, so, fa, mi, re, do. Right? Sing down.
Okay.
Do, Yeah. Sometimes I'll do that because it's just like an upper neighbor to the fifth, and the fifth is super easy to sort of. I said as I messed it up earlier. Right.
Question.
I will do that. I will sort of relate it to scales rather than try that song trick. Sometimes I still do a song trick because I learned that way too.
And while we're talking about learning relative pitch or good ways to go about it, why might I ask, Matt, are you using numbers and solfege rather than the letters? How's that beneficial?
That is beneficial because solfege and numbers will be the same no matter what key you're in.
Yes.
So you don't necessarily have to think C, A flat, and then think something else when I go D, B flat, that. Yeah. There's still do, la, do. Same interval, still a minor 6. We're just in a different quote unquote key, right?
Which those to perfect pitch would notice, which, quicker than those with relative pitch, I would think.
And I've already stopped listening because they can't handle my singing.
Sorry, guys.
My bad. Don't have perfect pitch.
Okay, so what's the next thing?
The other thing is learn to recognize chord qualities. And this is very, very useful. And this is, this may be what you were thinking about that I'd mentioned before, sort of levels of dissonance, levels of crunchiness, right? So it's super easy to hear that this note, or this chord, sounds sad, right? Minor chord.
Yeah. Serious.
Yeah. That is perhaps less easy to understand if I go... Did it sound sad then? Right?
Not as much, I don't think.
Not as much. And again, is that thing you mentioned earlier about our brains going too slow, right? So we're not going, okay, that was happy, that was sad, that was, damsel tied to a train track, that was sad, right?
Damsel tied to a train track. That would be the diminished chord.
That would be the
Yeah.
Damsel tied to the train track. Usually by some nefarious fellow dressed in black with masks and a long mustache,
Long curly mustache. Pringles man.
Yeah, I wonder if generations going forward even recognize these cultural references the way we do, I mean, it's an old reference for us even, right?
Sure.
I mean,
what's a couple of years, We know who Led Zeppelin is. They were rocking long before we were born,
Sure. Maybe you're right. Anyway, so, to take that example, it doesn't sound sad as much anymore. It does sound a little tense compared to that other chord, right? There was sort of a bland, Wonder Bread kind of chord.
Yeah.
Because it's just major triad, right?
Yeah. Is that the 2 chord?
That is a 2/6 chord, yes.
Okay.
And it's just a little tense, right?
Yeah. In relation to the 1 chord.
In relation to the 1 chord and in relation to the major 5 chord.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So 1, 2, 6, 5.
And did you say that you're in the key of C?
I am.
So if I had my relative ear training skills and my deduction theory brain, I could say that is a C, a D minor, and a G chord. Absolutely.
Very nice.
Because I have relative pitch and because I know chord qualities and their functions. We should add that to this, shouldn't we?
And absolutely. That 2 chord it was a chord of predominant function, pulling us to that 5 chord, right? Which in turn pulls itself to the 1.
Right.
Which is our place of rest. If I then, spice it up a little bit and go, how do I want to spice this? Okay. If I then spice it up a little bit and go, it's a little spicier, right? A little bit crunchier. 7 in the soprano. So.
1. So 2/7.
2/6/5.
2/6/5. Yeah. Clearly a 5.
A 5/7, right?
5/7, yeah.
Kind of a level of crunchiness there,
Yeah,
right?
more crunch.
Yeah, and then and if you listen to our ear training episodes, we do this kind of stuff a lot, right? And it gets into some pretty awesome, like when you go into get to the point where you're at a French augmented 6 chord, right?
We did that, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
Pretty proud of myself on that.
Yeah, something like that, right? Yeah, it real crunchy, right?
Yeah.
Get super crunchy. Yeah, so there's sort of levels of dissonance, where you think of a major triad as being really not dissonant at all, and then a minor triad being tense at most, a touch of tension at most, and then 7 chords have a touch of crunchiness. Chromaticism, like diminished 7 chords, diminished 7 chords even more. Then chromaticisms like augmented 6s and 7 to 7s to 5s and secondary dominance and stuff like that being awful crunchy, right? So you, in that way, learn to recognize chord qualities. calling them happy and sad is great, but again, once you get into context, your brain doesn't go to really work that way.
Yeah,
right?
the more notes you add to the chords, the more adjectives you have to come up with to describe it,
Right, yeah.
Oh, this one's sweet but complicated.
right. Yeah, and what are you going to do when you get to chordal harmonies, right? What was that? Kind of bright and
kind of
hopeful.
bipolar kind of.
Kind of bipolar.
The bipolar chord. That sounds like the train from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood is about to come around the corner. I have my own little associations, and I think it's good to do that, right?
Absolutely, yeah. No, it will help you greatly to have those kind of associations.
Personalized.
Yeah.
And then finally, what is the final thing on that list?
Do your own personal Jeremy torture. Test things with a friend. And test yourself with a friend. Let them come up with exercises and stuff and quiz you and challenge you and see how well you do. And like everything, it gets better with practice.
And that's what me and Matt do on the show.
And that's what we do on the show, absolutely.
Matt would be my friend.
Yes.
Helping to test me.
Yes, indeed. It's for his own good, the Jeremy torture.
Mm-hmm. It has to hurt if it's to heal. That was on the Neverending Story. That was a quote.
It has to hurt if it's to heal. Yeah, I remember that.
But it's true. There's wisdom in that.
Yeah.
All right, now we're going to get into something different here. What I call the perfect pitch sales pitch, cleverly named.
The perfect pitch sales pitch.
Okay, so everything discussed so far was the conventional wisdom about absolute pitch.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, growing up, I purchased many a music magazine, as I'm sure you did, Matt.
Oh, yes.
And
I had a subscription or two, if I recall correct.
And you probably saw somewhere at the end in the ads at some point, a perfect pitch ad, learn perfect pitch.
Oh, yeah. I had the little guy with the tuning fork balanced on his finger.
That's what I was going to say. Little kid with the crew cut smiling at a tuning fork.
He's got the tuning fork balanced. Yeah.
Okay, so that's not just me. That's a thing.
No, that was a thing, apparently.
But, I also gave that, even as a kid, not knowing much about perfect pitch, just looking at the hoke of the ad, I would kind of relate it to the x-ray glasses.
Right.
And gave it about as much validity to that or as a cure for baldness or, it just seemed like someone's trying to...
In other words, this can't actually work, right?
What is it, the Princess Bride quote? Life is pain. Anyone trying to tell you otherwise is trying to sell you...
Is selling you something, yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I thought when I saw these,
Yeah.
There's one particular one that pops up immediately if you Google perfect pitch or if you do a search on perfect pitch. So I took to Amazon. I decided... This was like probably in the $200-$300 range training course with this has been out long enough for it to have had cassettes when it first came out.
Right.
For example, this might have been the ad we were looking at.
Yeah, it might.
People. However, like anything I buy on Amazon, I go to the reviews.
Right.
And there was an interesting mix of people who said I did not have perfect pitch and this helped.
Yeah.
And there was also the people who said this is garbage, this is a scam.
Yeah.
And then there was people that say it'll work for you if you work for it. You know what I mean?
which is probably the truest of those opinions, right?
Mm-hmm. But based on the reviews, I didn't obviously order the course, so I can't be the authority on it or whether or not it works,
Right.
But the reviews, like I said, they were saying that the presenter uses color analogies a lot. So maybe you're recognizing blue as C or comparing baby blue to a higher octave or a lower octave of the C and so forth and so on. Now, to me, there's a little synesthesia discussion to be had in there.
I was just about to bring up that word.
And I wonder if people who have some degree of that can find this easier to do.
And finds that it helps you. Synesthesia being a condition of the brain in which you associate sounds with colors. Mm-hmm. So a certain sound will present to your brain the color purple, or kind of or a gold silvery blend or something.
Mm-hmm. And that doesn't just limit itself to sound and picture, or it's also it can be other things too.
Sure, yeah, it can be lots of things, and that's a condition that people have. It's just kind of a known. Mm-hmm. It's a known thing, right? That some people have. Most people don't do that, at least not to the degree where you can be diagnosed as a synesthetic, but some people do, and I wonder how much of a degree of having that might help you get something out of that course if that's the method they're using.
And then it seems like I saw another video by a guy who actually spent about a half an hour suggesting he learned perfect pitch and was not associated with this method, but he used the method. So he's not saying he's getting paid by this person, but he actually spent time, a significant chunk of time that I watched all the way through. He doesn't really go into how it's done. He kind of outlines a little bit. It sounds like another thing they do is like they'll spend a whole day, and you got to bring a friend along who's really cool and patient, and ideally another musician. And they would spend one day just playing nothing but E's, all the different octaves. This is an E,
Wow.
boom, boom. And then maybe they add an F sharp in there.
Wow.
And
So that's just like kind of hammering it into your skull.
That's kind of what it sounds like. And it might be that some people that works for, and it might be that some people that does not work for.
And it might be that works as long, if you're hammering out E's on the piano, you'll get into that situation as that other guy, right? Where you do it very, very well on the piano, and then it becomes harder on other instruments. And,
Good point. Good point. Maybe they should add other instruments to that. Oh, they might add on that. If you have a guitar, if all you have is a guitar, you're going to use your guitar.
Right,
Doing this kind of stuff. Hopefully a well-tuned. Make sure that thing is in tune if you're going to do this, y'all.
Yeah, seriously.
Okay, now here's where it gets a little interesting. In 2013, a study published in Frontiers in Systems Neuroscience argued that the drug valproate could reopen the critical learning period for adults. That period I'm talking about between the ages of 0 and 6, where you're absorbing everything and actually...
That sounds insanely dangerous.
I'm not sure if I would want to do that. Would you?
Do we really know enough about how the human brain works to just go and be doing stuff like that? I don't know.
Yeah, well, it turns out, and we're not doctors, so we do not recommend taking valproate.
If I was a doctor, I don't think I would recommend taking valproate. And I am one, not that kind of doctor. Whatever. I don't think you should do this.
You're smart enough to think this is a crazy idea.
I want to go on record as saying that does not sound like a good idea.
Music Student 101 does not endorse this idea.
Right.
Well, it turns out later a study conducted by Professor Howard Nussbaum, Shannon Held, Stephen Van Hedger, and Rachel Koch showed that perfect pitch might be more approachable than previously thought, and that it could be related to one's auditory working memory, which is the ability to recall and assign meanings to sounds. Mm-hmm. I could have told you that.
Yeah, right.
But a part of this study was an 8-week training period of note memorization, which is kind of what it sounds like we were talking about a second ago.
Yeah.
And then by the end, some of non-perfect pitch folks displayed the same accuracy as those with perfect pitch, and some did not. So we got this learning spectrum kind of thing again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Another cool thing, another part of the study was that it showed that those with perfect pitch could be retuned and kind of fooled a little bit. Okay, so he would start playing a song on the piano, just a piece, and he had his colleague go up to the little to the wheel and slowly take it down in pitch, very slowly, detuning it by 0.33 cents, which is about a third of a semitone, I think. And then she was doing it slowly. He didn't notice it, but then at the very end, when she kind of let go and it jerked back up, then he would hear it. So over time, slowly detuning, that kind of worked out,
Fascinating.
That, if you do that over a very long period of time, they would in one of these studies, they would let students listen to a 20-minute symphony where they drop the pitch that slowly.
Oh my gosh.
Gradually all the way through. And those with perfect pitch, unless they are extraordinarily sensitive, didn't really notice.
Wow.
So ultimately, this study argues that perfect pitch might not be as exclusive as previously thought, and B, that it can be approached perhaps later in life. And this argues against the critical learning period concept, like we spoke of earlier.
Right.
And more for the critical mass theory.
Right. So don't take valproate.
Don't worry about that. No. And the critical mass theory, which suggests that the level and type of attention a person pays to any given subject or skill can be affected by the time, by the amount of learning,
Yeah.
that takes place over time.
Right.
I could have told you that too. Dr. Jeremy over here.
Yeah, okay.
So what's the conclusion? Honestly, it's kind of inconclusive. I wonder if what these people are selling is some form of relative pitch. I wonder if people have to be born with it. I wonder if it's genetic. I wonder if it's cultural.
Yeah. I mean, based on this information, I feel like maybe what they're selling is sort of a form of really, really good relative pitch. Mm-hmm. But then that might just be all that perfect pitch is anyway. Right? I mean, if you want me to give like Jerry's final thoughts, it's like, yeah, so those people are sort of, what they're selling is a type of really, really good relative pitch, right? So then the big question in my brain left is, well, what's the difference in that and absolute pitch? Is absolute pitch, is it ultimately just really, really good relative pitch? Whether you're perceiving pitch relative to the first note of a scale degree, what we traditionally think of as relative pitch, or you're thinking of a note relative to your memory of the note from having heard it before, right, at 440 hertz or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a much more advanced kind of recollection and a much more advanced kind of comparison. Mm-hmm. But it's still kind of a relative sort of comparison, right? Yeah. So I wonder if perfect pitch isn't just really, really good relative pitch. Anyway.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I kind of liken it to an audible form of the photographic memory.
Yeah.
Some people can actually read through a book and remember every page they looked at.
Yeah,
And that's certainly...
Yeah, what's the scientific name for that? Eidetic, something like that, memory.
I don't know. I've never heard that one.
Yeah.
But that always just seemed like a superpower to me. And there were people that were trying to sell that back in the day. Yeah. The difference between the ad in the back of the Bass Player magazine that we saw and what I saw on the internet is you can't Yelp review, you can't review an ad like that.
Right, yeah.
All you can do is call the company and they can tell you how great it is.
Right.
But in this case, I was able to look at people's actual responses and see that it was quite mixed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Who knows? Maybe some of these people had it and didn't realize it.
Yeah.
But if you're a musician, I think you know it. I don't know. I don't know because I don't have it.
Who knows? Maybe for some of these people, they saw improvement just because they were practicing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, that improves everything.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. So who knows? It's an interesting topic. It's always been a fascinating topic to me.
Absolutely.
Like because I've known people who would claim, I have perfect pitch. Sure, yes. And like, okay, well, I'll get behind the piano where they can't see what note I'm playing. And like, what's that?
Then they would tell you.
And they don't know.
Yeah.
Like, okay. Yeah.
But your ears
and then I've known other people who genuinely did have perfect pitch. Our colleague in college, Marlon Spears.
Oh yeah, okay.
We used to quiz him on what note is the fluorescent light humming at, and and things like that. So it's always been a fascinating subject to me.
Yeah.
And there's probably not any hard or fast answers to very many of these questions.
But we do know that practice will get you what you really need, which is a musician. I think there's pros and cons of both, but I worry that if I ended up with perfect pitch, would I have the same problem when I hear something that's slightly out of tune, and how crazy would it drive me? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I thought that too. That even a slight bit out of tune could be, kind of torturous. Yeah, and the tuning wasn't great sometimes in a lot of our old classic recordings, and where you don't notice, but if you had perfect pitch, and you listen to the original recording of Blackbird, is that guitar super into
or being like, that Blackbird is out of tune.
You're right, yeah.
I hear all these birds singing. That one has got a problem, man.
That one's got a problem. Yeah.
I don't know if I want to live like that.
I know, right?
But I'm pretty happy being able to tell a French augmented chord if I hear it.
Hey, now that is valuable.
I don't know if I could do that right now, but I did during that episode, by God. Because I had it in the brain, right?
Right.
On the brain, anyways. All right, let's close up with a little fun, shall we?
Let's do that.
I'm gonna list some. I found a nice little list of famous people, most of them obviously musicians. Yes. Who we know have perfect pitch.
Excellent. Let's hear it.
So, do you know what are some classical composers, Matt? Have you heard any of them?
That would have had perfect pitch? Oh, I don't know that I've ever heard any anecdotes about classical. I mean, I could make some guesses.
Give me one guess.
Get off the top. Mozart?
Bingo.
Yeah.
Give me one
Nailed
more.
it on the first try.
Give me one more.
Let me think. That had perfect pitch.
Psycho geniuses. Think about it.
Psycho geniuses. Schumann?
No. Beethoven.
Beethoven.
Yeah. Beethoven.
Had perfect pitch.
Chopin.
That I believe.
Had perfect pitch, yeah. Why is that?
He's just that type of guy.
He's crazy. There was very little evidence suggesting that people with perfect pitch are socially eccentric. And there were studies that suggest that they aren't.
Yeah.
But a lot of these people are certainly socially eccentric.
Yeah.
And as we continue this list. Scott Joplin.
Great
ragtime composer. Another great ragtime composer, James Scott. With perfect pitch. Are you familiar with James P. Johnson, American pianist and composer?
I don't guess I am.
I'm not, but they have perfect pitch as well.
Oh, well, I'll check that out.
Now some musicians. And notice I'm gonna name. I tried to get a list from different parts of the world here.
Okay.
So to kind of punch the whole cultural thing, right?
Yeah.
That's a cross cultural thing. Artur Schnabel, you know of him? Austrian American pianist.
I do not.
Arthur Rubinstein.
Nah, him I've heard of.
Polish American pianist.
Yeah, he's one of the premier pianists in the world.
A lot of these seem to be pianists. But this one, Kirsten Flagstad, is a Norwegian opera singer.
Mm-hmm, I've heard of her.
Well known. Oscar Peterson and Glenn Gould, I've definitely heard of.
Absolutely.
These are Canadian pianists.
Yeah.
Yo-Yo Ma, baby.
Yeah, who I have met.
Have you really?
Yes.
Really?
Absolutely.
Did he come to the Stevens Center?
He came to the University of Georgia while I was getting my doctorate there. Heck of a nice guy.
This is a Chinese-American cellist.
Yes.
Who we now know his name either means mother or hemp. Yo-yo, mother, yo-yo, hemp, right? Depending on what register you say it in.
If you thought there was no better name for a cellist than Yo-Yo Ma, we now have Yo-Yo Hemp.
We're not we can't speak Chinese.
Obviously. That's painfully obvious at this point. But I'm going to call him Yo-Yo Hemp for a while now. Hey, I really am.
Remind me, Marlon Spears, he was blind, wasn't he?
He was.
Yeah, so Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles, both African-American pianist-songwriters without vision.
Without vision, yeah. And so that there's a correlation there to explore, too. The loss of one sense and all that. I think that's sort of a just an anecdote, just an old wives' tale, if you will, about you getting your other senses getting better.
Yes. It kind of. I mean, it makes sense. I don't know if there's validity to that, but it kind of makes sense. Like,
yeah,
the brain's not the same thing as the body, but I do know if your one leg hurts, you'll compensate.
Right.
And sometimes mess it up even worse. You know?
And we do know that the brain has the ability to rather easily and fluidly reassign neurons. So it's not like your brain has neural pathways that are just the vision pathways, and that's all they're good for. And if you lose your vision, those pathways are just done.
Yeah.
We know that the brain can repurpose those neural pathways to other things. So, I mean,
known as plasticity.
Yes, neuroplasticity.
Yeah, that's a thing.
Yes.
So that's interesting, isn't it?
It is.
And then Ella Fitzgerald, who was not blind, but an African-American singer.
Had perfect pitch.
Yeah. Old Blue Eyes, Frank Sinatra. Yeah. Brian Wilson, now that I believe.
Yeah.
Of the Beach Boys.
Yeah, I believe that too.
Now I just found this out, but I've seen the biopics and stuff like that and read about him and his producing style.
Yeah, and he produced Pet Sounds kind of by himself, without the other Beach Boys were like off on tour or something, and he stayed home and made Pet Sounds. And
he liked it his way.
He liked it his way, yeah.
And it might be he was just annoyed by everyone being slightly out of tune. I don't know. Another one, Michael Jackson. I can believe that.
I can believe that, yeah.
I can believe all of these.
I mean, I can believe it out of anybody.
Yeah. Whitney Houston.
Okay.
Jimi Hendrix. Mariah Carey, she's kind of and Celine Dion, both very well-known female vocalists. Celine Dion, I believe, is Canadian, isn't she?
She is.
And then Paul Schaefer, you know him from the David Letterman show a long time ago.
Yeah.
The keyboard guy, the sidekick.
Who would have known he had perfect pitch? That's fascinating.
But he was one of those guys that could do just about anything musically. Like he would have something ready to go to.
Right.
kind of call and response to David Letterman's jokes and whatnot. You know?
Right, yeah. I'm sure his absolute pitch helped him with that.
And finally, we have a comedian who I was made aware of by a young lady I dated a long, long time ago who was very big into British culture, introduced me to this guy named Bill Bailey. Do you know who he is?
I'm not that British, apparently.
He's kind of got like what I call a skullet, you know, where you got long hair, but you're bald on top, you know, and kind of a 5 o'clock shadow.
Right.
And he does a lot of cool stuff with music. He'll be on playing the piano and he makes that a part of his comedy routine.
Yeah,
and a lot of that is transposing different things and making happy songs sad and playing little musical tricks, you know.
Yeah.
Apparently he has perfect pitch as well. You know, so a good
Is he
list.
the guy that was like playing music upside down? Like one of his gags was he was playing this Camptown Races or something. He was playing it upside down, and somebody comes on the stage and takes a score on the piano and turns it back right side up, and it becomes Camptown Races, and everybody kind of applauds. That's the gag.
That might be Victor Borg.
Okay,
But
that might be Victor Borg.
That could be Bill Bailey, though. I don't know. That sounds like something either of them would do. It's just musical genius comedy.
Right.
You know, which blows people's minds, mine included.
Yeah, because obviously when the gag was when he was playing it upside down, you couldn't distinguish it.
Because
it just kind of sounded like noise, right? And then he turns it over and it becomes Camptown Races.
Would that have been in retrograde? Or would it have been in inverted?
It would have been in inverted retrograde.
Yeah. Who would Beethoven or Bach could just bust that out if they wanted to. Right?
Yeah.
Out of thin air, but not this guy.
No.
Me. I mean me, not me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Meaning us. Yeah, we can't do that. Right.
No. We can nerd out. We can digress and nerd out all day long. But anyways, before we get out of here, I would like to cite some articles.
Okay.
Perfect Pitch Explained by Max Winitsky. And this was on the University of Chicago News, uchicagonews.com.
Nice.
The Pitch Perfect, and that was regarding the study in 2013.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, okay.
Pitch Perfect by Sadie F. Dingfelder on the American Psychological Association.
That's legit, the American Psychological Association.
Hey, I do try and find legit sources, and I would also recommend if you guys are out looking for perfect pitch, you know, products or whatever, try and do whatever credibility research you can, because there are scams out there. I've seen them.
Oh, sure.
Just doing research for this episode. Anyways, there's one called Cognition and Behavior, Pitch Perception Heightened in Autism by Jessica Wright on spectrumnews.org. And then there's one, How Can You Tell If You Have Perfect Pitch by Sabrina Searwalt on Scientific American. As a recap, I don't know what to say, man. There's perfect pitch, which very few people have.
Yes.
Maybe
it could be just really good relative pitch.
It could be really good relative pitch, which can be learned way easier, which is not easy at all. Let's just go ahead and say that. For me, anyways, for a lot of people. And then, that's...
Yeah, there you go.
We don't really have an answer, but maybe there's hope.
Yeah, the only answer we have is maybe there's hope. If you want to develop perfect pitch, maybe go out and try. See how well you do.
In fact, if anyone just has a couple $100 sitting around and wants to experiment with this course, please have at it and get back to us.
And give us the results, yeah.
We'll cover it. We'll talk about it in a listener mail.
I don't feel like any time in the near future will we be sponsored by, what was that drug again? Arrowfane?
Whatever.
Valpro 8.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, Valpro 8.
We're not going to get any Valpro 8 sponsorships anytime soon after this episode, alas.
Oh, well.
Nor will we be sponsored by Skullets.
We won't be buying those dune buggies.
Nah.
Skullets. On that note.
On the word of the day.
Thanks again for listening. We can't wait to get back in here.
Thank you very, very much. We'll see you soon.
Listeners with perfect pitch. Feel free to contact us and share your experiences. If you're listening to this on our YouTube channel, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. If you wish to support us, you can visit the donate page of our website at musicstudent101.com. And as always, for questions or comments, you can reach us at info@musicstudent101.com.